Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Somerset Libraries Presents An Evening with Claire Fuller. We are so thrilled that so many of you could join us this evening for what is our first virtual author event of this kind. But more importantly, we are overjoyed that you are all here with us to celebrate Claire making the shortlist of the Women's Prize for Fiction. This is such a wonderful, well-deserved achievement and is testament to how beautiful Unsettled ground and Claire's writing in general really is. So I hope that you are all raising your glasses or your cups of tea or glasses of Ribena with us this evening as we congratulate Claire. My name is Naomi and I will be in the chat window posting up links and keeping an eye on any questions that come through for Claire. We will put these to her at the end of the event this evening, so if you have anything that you would like to ask, please do pop it in the Q&A section and we will try to get around to as many as possible. Likewise, if you experience any technical difficulties throughout the course of this evening, just let us know. Our technical library wizards have been working very hard to bring this event together over the last few days, but as we're going out live, there may be some unexpected hitches. We hope there won't be, but you never know with things like this. So just let us know and we'll beaver away in the background to fix it. Anyway, that is enough from me for the time being. So without further ado, it is with great pleasure that I present to you my colleague Alex and of course the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist nominee, Claire Fuller.
Thank you, Naomi. So we're going to start with a few questions and then Claire is going to read us an excerpt from her book. And then we will hear from Henry playing a bit of music later, and then there will be an opportunity for you to post questions at the end. So if there's anything that you feel we haven't covered that you'd love to know more about, do write them in the chat box because we'd love to hear your questions as well. But we'll get going. So Claire, again, congratulations on the shortlisting. And I thought with that in mind, a great first question would be to find out which female authors have inspired you, continue to inspire you in your writing.
Yeah. Oh, so many. Kind of off the top of my head, Shirley Jackson. So she wrote kind of lots of dark fiction in the 50s, really. Her novel We Have Always Lived in the Castle is one of my favorites. But more contemporary female writers, I guess, people like Elizabeth Strout, Charlotte Wood, Australian writer. It's so hard to cut. I'm terrible with names. I read a lot. I probably read a couple of books a week, but can I think of names right now? So yeah, there's lots, and they'll come to me over the course of the evening, I'm sure. Yeah, but
that's okay. Maybe we can revisit at the end if you've got some extra names. Great. Well, I mean, on the sort of theme of women, when I was reading the book, I loved Jeannie's character because, you know, she starts off as this character that seems quite feeble, quite weak. And then as the book goes on, you as a reader realize there's, you know, a lot more to a character, there's a lot more strength, and she realizes it as well. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about how you developed her character and whether that building of strength was a sort of conscious thing that you decided on.
No, because I don't tend to write like that. You know, that I don't plan. So her character really did develop as I went along. And I think, you know, her strength grew as I wrote her, because I didn't know what kind of person she was going to be before I started writing, and I almost write to discover. And so I think her strength came out as I wrote the scenes and the difficulties that she experiences. And I guess, you know, I always do try to write strong women. They're often, you know, more interesting. Well, whether they're women or men, they're kind of more interesting as main characters if they've got some kind of strength in them. I'm just checking, you're not hearing any feedback because I can hear a little whistle. Do I sound okay?
I can't hear it.
Okay. Hopefully I sound okay.
Guessing Naomi will probably pop in if she can, so we'll guess that there's no feedback. That's really interesting, and I suppose that's why the building of strength in Jeannie kind of comes as a surprise to the reader as well, because if you were developing that as you wrote, then you know, that's why we almost didn't expect it either, which is that's really interesting. So I was just thinking before we went on with any more questions, just in case we've got anybody watching who hasn't read the book yet, maybe if you could give a bit of a summary of the book and give us a short reading, if that's okay.
Yeah, very happy to. So Unsettled Ground is about twins, Jeannie and Julius, who are 51 years old when the novel opens, and they still live at home with their mother. And they have lived a very sheltered, secluded life in relative poverty, really, but they have been fairly contented because this is the life they've known. So Jeannie has worked in the garden with her mother, growing vegetables. They have a large piece of land because she has been diagnosed with a heart condition, and so she has to live her life perhaps quite sedately. Julius does go out to do odd jobs, but they live in a very kind of hand-to-mouth way, all based on cash. They don't have a bank account. They don't have any transport. They have very limited educations, no qualifications, very little technology. That only Julius has a very basic phone. But they've managed in that way for many, many years, for 51 years. But the book opens with their mother, Dot, dying. It's not a spoiler because it does happen right at the beginning. And when she dies, they discover that there are lots of debts that they were unaware of, and the cottage that they believed was theirs for the rest of their lives, it turns out that there is a lot of debt owing or rent owing on the cottage to their landlords, the Rawsons, who come to kind of claim it back. And there is so little money in the cottage that they are so worried about how they're going to bury their mother and pay for a funeral, that the siblings, the twins, decide to bury her in the garden and not tell anybody. So the bit I'm going to read, most of the book is from Jeannie's point of view, but the bit I'm going to read is actually from Julius's point of view, because he does get some little sections of his own. But one thing I should say is that this section also features a character called Jenks, and he's a Scotsman, and I cannot do Scottish accents. So I'm going to just pretend he's an ordinary man from Wiltshire, rather than try and bungle it completely. So I'm sure that will be fine. In the shop, Julius dithers. He's low on tobacco and rolling papers, and he wants, no needs, a pint in the pub. What to do with the money from the guttering job? If he wants to get any work, he'll need credit for his mobile phone. He buys £10 worth and some tobacco. In the pub, he plugs his mobile into charge. He sits at the bar next to Jenks, sips at a pint of bitter to make it last, and rolls a thin cigarette. Heard about your mum? Jenks, a scrawny man whom Julius has rarely seen out of the public bar of the Plough, tips his glass towards his mouth, and Julius sees his top lip reach out to the beer like a snail feeling its way. What a bummer, Jenks says when he's swallowed. Yep, Julius says, licking his cigarette paper, sticking it down. Thanks. He waves the cigarette at Jenks and goes out the back to smoke. He has a blister on his palm from digging, and he rubs the bubble of it across his lips, feeling the fluid move beneath the skin. He considers if there's a legal requirement for the depth of a grave. He wonders again whether they're allowed to do what they're doing. Sod it. He doesn't care if they aren't. He's taken off the turf and has gone down a spade's depth, which isn't enough. Won't be enough for Jeannie, and it would be an utter cock-up if the foxes started digging, or Maud. He rubs the bristles along his jaw, smokes his cigarette, thinks about what the Rawsons say is owing. Again sees Rawson shout, "Nothing," up the stairs to his wife. Remembers the contents of the envelopes in his coat pocket. Fuck it, he thinks. Fuck it all. When he's back at the bar and another 10 minutes have passed, Jenks says, "You got a text? Something about a boiler from that bit of Totty who lives over the fish and chip shop." "Bloody hell, Jenks, read everything, why don't you? Shall I bring in my diary next time?" Jenks smirks. And after checking his phone, Julius finishes off the rest of his beer in one open-throated gulp. Boilers aren't his specialism. He doesn't really have a specialism, and he doesn't have his tool rucksack with him, but he wheels his bike through the village to Shelley Swift's. She's wearing a leopard print top and a denim skirt when she answers the door, and lilac lipstick that she surely doesn't put on for work. "Bloody boiler, there's no hot water," she says, as he follows her up the stairs. The boiler is on a wall in the kitchen, and as soon as he inspects the hole in the cover, he sees that the pilot light has gone out. He pushes 2 buttons, the gas ignites, a tiny blue flame shows through the hole, and they hear the boiler kick in. "You're amazing," Shelley Swift says, and when he turns, she doesn't move back. Her nose and mouth are out of focus, but her eyes, lashes clotted with makeup, and hazel irises with the circumference of a deeper brown, catch him and hold him. He wants to kiss her, but feels he is too tall, too stooped, all elbows and knees. He is unused to an encounter like this, out of practice. "Can I use your toilet?" he says, and she laughs that husky laugh and lets him go. In the bathroom under the window is a shelf unit crammed with books. He pulls one out. "Just like her mother," the title reads in raised silver letters. Behind the words is a close-up of some scrubby bushes and a patch of bare soil. Just visible in the earth is a woman's ear with an earring through the lobe. He shoves the book back. On the landing at the top of her stairs, as he is saying that she should text them if anything else goes wrong, Shelley Swift kisses him, her mouth slightly open, her tongue touching his lips, and he's aware of the waxiness of her lipstick. He doesn't exactly kiss her in turn, too shocked by the feel and the taste of her. When they pull apart, she laughs once more, and he almost runs down the stairs and out the door. All the way home, he rides his bike without holding on, as though he were 13 again, using his knees to steer so that he can hold his fingers to his nose and smell the lemony scent of Shelley Swift's bathroom soap.
Thanks, Claire, that's great. And hopefully, yeah, for anyone watching who hasn't read it, that's given you a bit of a taster and a thirst for more. The section you just read, I think the beginning bit in the pub particularly, it really sums up well what it's like to live in a quiet village where, you know, your business is everybody's business. And, you know, it's a theme you explore a lot, this what it's like to live in a quiet village. You know, we find out that because Jeannie and Julius don't have a phone, they're relying on a payphone, but the payphones have all been turned into defibrillator places. And I just wondered, I mean, have you lived in a quiet village yourself? Is that something you have experience of, or is it something you kind of researched a bit?
Well, I lived in a village until I was 10, but that was, you know, a long time ago. So I couldn't really, I could draw on kind of certain characters, maybe, you know, characters that continue to exist, you know, eccentrics or whatever, but and also places. So I lived in a thatched cottage, as these characters do at the start of the book. So I did draw on that, but I wasn't, that when I was in a village, the phone box was still a phone box, it wasn't a defibrillator or a little library as they are all turned into. So I did do a lot of research about villages. Well, I walked through a lot of villages too, but I did a lot of research about, what's changing through village life, in terms of things like the bus services being reduced and medical centres being moved and libraries being closed down, and all those kinds of things that affect people without many resources. And these days it is often the elderly or the older people who rely on those things, and when they're withdrawn, the effects can be really, really difficult for them. So it was more, I did some online research around those things, and I walked through villages kind of just to get a contemporary feel of them, really.
Great, yeah, it's interesting, and I think for probably a lot of the people watching are from Somerset, and everything you explore will be very familiar. So kind of leading on from that, I guess, is alongside that you explore rural poverty a lot, and traditionally in the news it's urban poverty that's in the news all the time, and that gets highlighted, and maybe rural poverty gets forgotten a bit. And I just again wondered about the sort of research behind that and what you noticed were the differences.
Yeah, I do feel like it's urban poverty that gets talked about and is in the news, and actually is written about in novels. Just think about, is it Shuggie Bain? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but the won the Man Booker last year, set in Scotland, I think. I can't remember which city was it. Glasgow, I'm not sure. Anyway, it does feel like it was all about urban poverty, and when I realized the situation that these characters find themselves in, I looked for literature that wrote about them in England or in the UK, and I couldn't really find any. The closest I think was Elmet, but it wasn't, the characters weren't particularly poor. They did live in the country, by Fiona Mosley, I think that is. So I couldn't really read fiction, which is what I usually do when I'm writing books. I will read books around similar subjects, and so that really wasn't available to me. And also non-fiction, there weren't really whole books written on this subject, but there was a lot of stuff online, and so I kind of dug into a lot of that, official reports. But normally what I would also do is go and have some kind of conversation with people in the situation that I'm writing about, but it just wasn't appropriate to go and find someone in this situation and interview them. That just wouldn't have been right. So I found people who help people in this situation. So, for instance, I spoke at length to a community nurse, and rather than her tell me about her patients, which obviously she isn't allowed to do, I told her about what I was writing, and to check in whether this seemed right, and it did. She said there are definitely people who unfortunately live this way, and since then since the book was published, I've been doing lots of events online with bookshops, and in fact one with Hungerford Bookshop, which is quite near where Unsettled ground is set. And so there were people on that call who said, I'm a teacher in a school in Wiltshire. I come across people like this all the time. So that's a sad thing, but also kind of reassuring that I got it right. And then I did other kinds of research. So there's one point where Jeannie all she has left is something like £5.55, and she has to get all the food that they need with that money. So I went to my local co-op to try and really imagine, if that was all the money I had, what could I buy, and what do you see as essential? You know, it was a really eye-opening exercise. But of course, you know, I could go home and eat whatever I liked from my cupboards, and my cupboards were full. So it, you know, it was as close as I could get, but not really particularly close.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What you mentioned about not being able to afford much for £5, it reminds me of the point where she has to choose whether to buy sanitary towels or not. And a few years ago, as a library service, we did a project around period poverty, and it really struck me that there were a lot of projects for girls and teenagers, which is good, but there was nothing out there really for providing sanitary products for older women. And like you say, it's something that just isn't really noticed, how it affects older people.
And Jeannie's very proud. There are things on offer to her from neighbours and, you know, people who want to help her, but she doesn't want to take it. She refuses to take it because that's how she's been brought up.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think it's kind of refreshing, but it's also what makes the story gripping, is that it doesn't go down that classic nice countryside, you know, all is sweet. It's, you know, it's a bit more realistic, which is, it's nice to see as something different. So on the subject of the poverty thing, I was just interested about the bringing in of the caravan part at the end, which, so towards the end of the story, Jeannie and Julius move into a caravan, and that's really when things start to hype up and, you know, move at quite a fast pace. Was that all quite organic as well? Is that just something that kind of, as you were writing, it just came into the story?
That's actually how the story started. So Henry, who we're going to hear from later, who's my son and a musician, he, with his friend, discovered a caravan in the woods not too far from where I live. Dilapidated, vandalized, the windows had been broken, and Henry knows that I like strange places. I like places that people have left and are very atmospheric. So he said, "You've got to come out and see this place, Mum." So we went out there, and he was absolutely right. It was a very small caravan in the woods. It had obviously been white at one point and now was green. The windows had been smashed, the door was hanging off. There were still bits and pieces that whoever must have been living there at one point had left behind, bits of bedding and crockery or whatever. And it was a really sad and not a very nice place, almost kind of haunted, but by the people who had once lived there rather than ghosts or something. And it just started making me think who would have lived here, because it was quite a long way from anywhere, a long way from a village. It didn't even have really a track to it. And what would their life have been like to take them to this place? How did they manage? Because there was no electricity, no running water, no toilet or anything. And then what was their life like afterwards? Did it improve, or did it continue to go downhill? And so that's what started the whole novel off. So I knew, although I don't plan, I knew that I had to get Jeannie to this caravan at some point in the novel. That's the only thing I knew really when I started writing. But I went back in time to see what her life had been like to take her to that point. So the caravan always did exist in my mind, but I didn't know what would happen to their lives to make them be in that situation.
It's really interesting. I've never sort of thought of authors starting in the middle and then going backwards like that. So the other theme you explore quite a lot is around illiteracy. because Jeannie as an adult is essentially illiterate. She has some basic reading skills, and again, that's something we've supported as a library service. And I was interested to see that you're a patron of Read Easy. Sorry,
Winchester branch of Read Easy. Yeah.
The Winchester branch, yeah. So which we work with, and I wondered, when you started working with them and found out more.
Oh, you've frozen. Don't know if you've frozen forever.
You became involved with them.
Sorry, I missed that. You froze for a moment for me.
Oh, that's okay. So I was just wondering, with your involvement with Read Easy, did you already know about the rates of illiteracy in adults before you got involved with them, or was that something you've learned about since becoming a patron?
I did lots of research around illiteracy, and so I did know those rates. It's something like, isn't it? I think it's 5% of English adults have a reading age of 5 or below, which just surprised me so much. And even in a fairly wealthy area that I live in, you know, there's still lots and lots of people who struggle to read and write. So it was while I was researching all that I came across Read Easy, and they approached me, and we started kind of working together. By that time, most of the book was written, or I'm sure it was a long way along when I kind of agreed to get involved with them. But yeah, I had to do lots of research around that, because I you know, you can still put yourself in the position of a character and think, what is life like for this person if this is how they're moving through the world. But because reading and writing is so fundamental to who I am, you know, as a writer, but also for all of us who can do it, I think we often just take it for granted. So as you really move through your environment, you're reading things all the time. And I kept writing Jeannie into particular scenes, and then discovering that I needed her to read or to write for this scene to work, and then suddenly thinking, oh, but she can't do that. And there's one point where I decide I really need her to go and get a job to earn some money. And then I'm thinking about that, but nearly all the jobs are advertised on the internet these days, you know, even very small jobs. So that's not going to work for her. She doesn't have access to a computer. She can't read it anyway. And then how would she write her CV or even an email? So I send her off to the local newsagents, because I think, well, maybe, you know, there'll be some cards in the window. And then, you know, I'm writing the scene and I actually get her in front of the window, and then I realize that she can't read those either. And she figures out a way around it. And I'm almost writing this as she's kind of doing it, if you see what I mean. And it really opened a door for me for how people in her situation must have to work around this issue, because she also wants to hide it from people. She doesn't want to admit and ask for help all the time. So, you know, how is she going to get that information from a card in the window if she can't read it? And she does work out a little plan. I was quite proud of her, actually.
Great, thank you. And then just a final question from me. On another big theme is around music. So Jeannie and Julius are both really talented musicians. I just wondered what inspired you to make music a big part of their story.
Well, I listen to music when I write, and usually I pick a playlist or an artist, all their work, or a few albums or something like that. And I looked around when I was writing Unsettled Ground, listened to lots of things to try and work out what was going to be right. But it took me a long time to find anything. And in fact, I found 2 pieces of music that I listened to. So only 2 songs that I listened to for 2 years while I wrote this novel. So they are just completely in my head now. I think maybe because there were only 2 songs, they also made it into the book. So one is an old English folk song called Polly Vaughn, and the version I listened to was sung by a musician called Tia Blake, and people can hear that on YouTube. And then also a song that my son Henry Ailing wrote called We Roam Through the Garden. And once I was listening to these 2, and as I was writing the characters of Jeannie and Julius, I don't know, they became folk musicians. But because they've been very insular, they've only ever played at home in their lives up until the time in the book. So their mother played the banjo, Jeannie plays the guitar, Julius plays the fiddle, and their father used to play the piano. And that's what these characters did when they were at home living together. They didn't read books or watch television. They played music together. And then their father dies and Dot dies. So now there are just the twins playing music together. So for me, I think the music was there partly to show that Jeannie was capable of great learning. You know, she couldn't read or write, and maybe the education system had failed her, but she was very, very capable, is very capable. And then also, I think the music is hopefully lifts the book, because it is, you know, sad things happen, bad things happen to these characters. I put them through the mill a bit, but hopefully
you put the reader through the mill a bit.
I'm sorry. But yeah, hopefully the music, although it is quite melancholy music, but hopefully it does bring some joy, I think.
Great, thank you. I didn't mean that as a bad thing.
No.
It was a good running through the mill. You know, like, oh no, next page. Great, so that leads us nicely into our next section. So we are going to hear from Henry now. He's going to play one of those songs. And yeah, just give us a little bit break from talking for 5 minutes.
Okay, hello. I got to go. Right. Roam through the garden, down the green avenue, felt the ground start to harden, and saw the sky turn its blue, like a morning song, or a light summer's rain, like a place to belong that you can't sustain. Do you know? Before our singing is through and our voices lie broken, before the silence speaks true and all the lies we let have spoken, for here we would stay do to the day for holding back tomorrow. Oh, do you know where then
Goodbye.
Thanks so much, Henry. It was beautiful.
You're very welcome.
A little bit shy.
You must be pleased for your mum as well.
Yes, very much so. Well done, Mum.
Good boy. And he plays beautifully. Now maybe you can see why I could listen to that song for 2 years on repeat. It is very beautiful.
Absolutely. I would have expected you to fall asleep at some time, so it's that kind of relaxing, like just forget about your worries kind of music.
Very, very laid back, yeah, very chilled.
Yeah, no, it's really lovely. Great. So yeah, that will hopefully give the watchers, the viewers, a bit of a taste of the kind of the atmosphere of the book, I think, because we do have these songs going throughout it and we get the words, and we have a few scenes where Jeannie and Julius are playing, and I think that really kind of sums up the atmosphere of the book for a lot of it. Okay, so we're now going to move on to questions from the audience. So we've got one question through already. Actually, we've got a couple of questions through. So I can't remember who asked this one. Catherine Seymour. She was really interested to know about the behind the scenes of the Women's Prize for Fiction. She just wondered when you found out about being nominated and being shortlisted, and so it passes on her congratulations as well.
Thank you very much. I assume I'm allowed to say this now, but they haven't restricted it. But I did find out 2 weeks before. So 2 weeks before, I knew I was on the long list before it was announced, and then 2 weeks ago, I knew that Unsettled Ground was on the short list. And it's been so difficult to keep it quiet. I'm honestly under kind of pain of death not to tell anyone. So I told my husband because I knew that I could absolutely trust him. And then I'm in a bubble with my best friend who lives alone. And when I heard that Unsettled Ground was even on the long list, my agent phoned me up at home and told me, and I literally, apparently, I don't really remember, screamed down the phone. And my best friend was in the house downstairs, and so I kind of had to tell her, also under pain of death, not to tell anybody, because she wanted to know why I was screaming. But I didn't tell Henry, I didn't tell my daughter, I didn't tell my parents. You're really not allowed to tell anybody because it could just leak out. You tell one person, they tell someone else. So I knew that I wasn't allowed to do that. But so I've had 2 weeks really of events with people saying, oh well, fingers crossed for the shortlist, and I'm saying, yeah, fingers crossed, and knowing it was actually on the shortlist. But I didn't, all they told me was that Unsettled Ground was. I had no idea who the other books would be, who the other authors were. So that was really lovely to see tonight, to discover that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Have you read any of the other books that are on the shortlist with you?
No, I've read, oh, well, I'm reading one that's on the long list, and I've read another that was on the long list, but they weren't on the short list. But I am really enjoying them, so I will carry on and finish them. But yeah, I think I'd like to read the other 5 on the short list. They all sound great.
Yeah.
Have you read any of them?
No, I haven't, just yours. But like you, it's good inspiration for where to go next, isn't it? The problem with working in a library is your list of books to read is never ending.
Also, you know, the difference with a bookshop, you know, in a library, you could just take, you know, they're all for the taking as well. It's not as if you have kind of any limit on them. It must be so difficult.
It is.
Lovely. Difficult and lovely.
Nice, but yeah. Okay, quite a few questions have come up now, so we've got plenty to get on with. So Maggie asks, why did you choose to have twins as your main character?
I drop in a lot of things when I'm first writing, with just things that I'm interested in. So for some reason I discovered this fact about twins, that they could be born a long way apart, and obviously they're still twins. So I think Jeannie and Julius are, I think it might be 23 hours. I think there have been twins who've been born even longer apart than that. I just thought, wow, that's quite amazing. So I put that in without knowing whether it would stay. But by the time I've kind of got to the end of the first draft, some things get removed, some things remain, and the twins remained because it felt to me like it was quite useful to show that they had more or less had very similar lives up to the age of 51 when the book starts. You know, Julius has left home a little bit more, gone out to work, but they've both been very constrained. And then when Dot dies, it seems that their lives, or their objectives and their desires, move off in different directions. And so that was quite useful to show through twins. And without giving anything away, the book starts with Jeannie with her heart condition, and it kind of moves her through, and we've talked about this really a bit, towards kind of freedom and understanding the world more, and understanding that people will offer help and she can take it. Whereas Julius starts that way, very much more open than Jeannie and able to go out in the world. And then his life becomes much more constrained by the end for various reasons that I won't go into. So in that way, they kind of cross, which I also quite like. They could have been siblings. They didn't have to be twins, I suppose.
Yeah, great, thank you. So next question. Paul, I think you've touched on this slightly, but it'd be good to know a bit more. Before you sit down to write a book, do you have it all planned out, or do you see where the characters take you?
Completely see where they take me. So without, aside from knowing about they need to get to this caravan at some point, I have no idea who they are, what they will do. I write a scene and there are some consequences from that scene, and that helps me write the next scene. And that's how I move through the book. And then I get to a stage where maybe there are 2 or 3 possible outcomes from one scene. And I might start thinking then about what the reader expects to happen. And I make sure I don't write that, you know. So that's that. So no, there's no planning that goes on at all.
Great. Well, I can definitely say you succeed on going where the reader doesn't expect you to go. I was not expecting the turns that happened. Great. So we've got Emma. She says, hello, Claire. Love that you can read 2 books in a week. I just wondered what you're reading at the moment, and can you read books whilst you're in the middle of writing, not including those you use for research?
Yeah, I read even while I'm writing. I'm perhaps a little bit more careful, so I try and read books that, not maybe about the same subject, but maybe they are, you know, perhaps more literary fiction while I'm writing. So they have kind of text or the words are something that I might, the writing I should say, is something that I might aspire to, so it kind of actually makes me work a little bit harder. Yeah, so it probably is a couple of books a week. I post most of them on my Instagram account, and have kind of Claire's books at breakfast, so I'm always reading at breakfast and I have a nice picture of them. This is what I'm reading at the moment. I'm loving it. This is Happiness by Niall Williams, and he lives in Ireland. I know, I've met him and I know his wife quite well, but it's just great. It's so many kind of Irish characters, eccentrics, and really, really interested to see what happens. It's about when the electricity comes for the first time to this remote Irish village. Yeah, so I'd really recommend it.
So sort of similar themes in a way to yours, I suppose. There, yeah. Okay, so next question's Claire. Okay, so quite a long one. When I started, I thought the book would be all about problems of twins dealing with petty forms and rules after death and burial of a mother. But paperwork can easily get buried too. I think it's probably true that authorities don't have the resources needed to chase everything in our lives. A bit similar to how school children can slip through the net, which I thought was an interesting observation. Absolutely loved description of Bridget and Saffron's homes and lives from Jeannie's point of view. Thank you for that. I think a sequel would be brilliant. Perhaps the gypsy from school can resurface.
No plans for a sequel, sorry.
Is that something you think you would never be very keen on writing sequels, or is it, you know, depend what book came next?
No, I don't think I will. I've just got too many new ideas that I want to get on with. And also, by the time I've spent so long with these characters, you know, I do love them, but also, you can go now. I want to start this new group of people.
Yeah.
So I am a bit fickle in that way. So I can't imagine ever going back. It would feel like going back to me, whereas I want new people, new situations.
Yeah. So do you become quite attached to your characters? Are you sort of sad when you finish the book and you're not spending time with them anymore?
Not really, because by the time it's gone through edits and copy edits and all proofreading and all that stuff, I've probably read the book, I don't know, 30 or 40 times. You know, seriously. So I have had enough of them, really.
Wow.
Yeah. No, they've gone. That's it. Yeah. I think about them an awful lot when I'm writing. They completely fill my head, so that everything I'm doing, I think, how would Jeannie do this? How would she deal with this situation? But that's when I'm writing. When I finish, no, they can go.
I can understand that after so many readings. Actually, that links on quite well to our next question, which is, have you ever disliked any of your characters so much that you've changed their personalities or cut them out of the story?
Yeah, in my second novel, Swimming Lessons, there's a character called Gil, who is a father and a husband, and he is a very, very difficult character. He has lots of affairs. He doesn't treat his wife very well. But I started writing the book from his point of view, and I probably wrote about 20,000 words, so a substantial amount from his point of view. And after that, I thought, actually, I don't want to hear from you anymore. You're just such a horrible man. So I cut all but about 1,000 of those words. And I wrote the book mostly from his wife's point of view and his daughter's point of view. But because I'd spent maybe those 20,000 words on him, he's still somehow very central, and these women kind of orbit around him, and he is still annoyingly the center of the book for me. But yeah, I did cut most of him.
Lovely, thanks. That's really interesting. So I think that's the last of the questions that we had through, which is quite good timing. So not to put you on the spot, but did any new female authors come into your head whilst you were talking? So you don't have to. I thought I'd give you the opportunity.
My husband has made me some very lovely shelves that you can see there.
Oh yeah.
But they're mostly all books that I haven't read yet, actually, so that's not really much help.
That's okay. No, don't worry.
It hasn't. I should have been thinking about that while Henry was playing, or looking it up at least. There are lots. Oh well, this won't be very helpful because her latest book hasn't been published in the UK. I'm not sure whether it will, but there's an author called Melanie Finn, her latest book is The Hare, which isn't available in the UK, but her other 3 books are. She's a terrific writer, really, really great. So I do suggest people go and look her up. She's not particularly well known, but she should be.
Great, thanks. Okay, right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the questions. So I think we will hand back to Naomi, who I think has got a few closing bits.
Hello, just restarting my video there. What a wonderful interview. Thank you to Claire and also to Alex. I know it's not always easy doing an interview, but it's been wonderful. I've been sat here mesmerized the whole way through. So thank you to the both of you, and I think all that remains for me to say is, again, congratulations to Claire, and I know you've got a glass of champagne down by the side of you.
I've been trying not to drink it because the bubbles and talking don't go together.
You've done incredibly well. But huge congratulations, and thank you for bearing with us whilst we put on this our first virtual event. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yes, happy celebrating. I'm sure we'll be going on. So yes, thank you very much.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you, yes, to Alex and for the questions, and for you, Naomi, to organising all. It didn't come across as your first event. I mean, very slick. And please come back and sign up for all the other events that I'm sure.
That's good. And thanks to everybody who signed in and watched as well, because it wouldn't be an event if nobody was watching us.
Yeah, the questions that came through are really great, so thank you for taking part, and I hope you have the time to sort of follow some of the links I popped in the chat for Henry's music and Claire's Spotify playlist that she sent us for the music she was listening to whilst writing the book, and of course Claire's Instagram as well. So but yes, thank you very much, and enjoy your champagne.
Bye-bye.